All right, bring it on in. The first Tuesday in November is here. That means the first 12-team college football playoff bracket has been released. The first projections, all top 25 teams were just announced moments ago. We're breaking this down live reaction show. We have our first projected 12-team bracket in front of us. I bet you if I pulled up the 12-team bracket from the first one last year, it probably looked a lot different than the final copy, but lot to break into, a lot to talk about here, Joe, but welcome back. How are we? And it's pretty crazy that we're already at this point in the season.
Yeah, cool. I mean, you ain't kidding. And we talk about it like every college football season, how we're like, oh, it feels like just yesterday we were breaking down, the Ireland game. But it really is crazy how that game, just to show you how much goes, changes in the college football season. That game had two top 25 preseason teams between Kansas State and Iowa State. Now both teams are unranked. Iowa State's on a 4-game skid. Kansas State has been not very good, not very bad either. But and then you have a top 25 here of teams. Like we get our first look at what the postseason could look like, and it's really exciting. And like you said, will these rankings change before December? Of course, but it's still cool to kind of see, hey, what it would be if it ended today, and you can kind of start doing the scenarios and look in your head of like, hey, you know, I would say the cutoff line is right about here. But Coyle, we were kind of talking about it a couple of weeks ago, how there's still so many teams that are still very much alive for a playoff spot. And that's kind of the one cool thing about the 12-team playoff. You can look at any team in this top 25, even teams with like 3 losses. Like if you go through, the only team with 3 losses that's ranked is Tennessee. They're hanging on at 25. If Tennessee wins out, now I think they would need some help, but
Mm.
they're alive. I still think they would have a shot to make it in. You have all these teams right now, Pitt at 24, very quiet, 7-2. They have a shot to, go in. Obviously, if they win the conference, they'd get that little auto bid, but they still got a shot. You have all these teams that are still very much alive to where in years past, you lose a second game, you're done. So it's pretty cool to see, all these teams still fighting and staying alive.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think there's anything too crazy from this initial top 25. Like I was going through after this game, or after we discuss this, we'll go through and break down the games of the week. But there was a few kind of adjustments that we had to make in the AP poll to the college football playoff rankings. You got Iowa sliding in; they were unranked this week in the AP poll. They go up to number 20 this week. They play Oregon. That's a big time matchup there. Notre Dame coming in at number 10, Miami all the way down at 18, even though Miami beat Notre Dame. That was one of the things they were talking about on the TV. Both BYU and Texas Tech ahead of Oregon. I was surprised to see that as well, at least Texas Tech being ahead of them. Okay, BYU could say so because they're undefeated, but Texas Tech being ahead of Oregon with Oregon's only lost to the number 2 team in the country, Indiana. That was a bit of a point of discussion, but I guess anything in kind of the top 12, Joe, that really stuck out to you? I mean, the any of the matchups that caught your eye? Virginia, Ole Miss. I don't think anyone was projecting that. Anything in that top 12 that really stood out to you, or any of the teams not in the top 12 that you think should have been in there?
Well, Cole, you were kind of alluding to it, or not even alluding, you were just talking about it with Oregon. I was a little bit surprised at first when I saw them behind, Texas Tech, BYU, but it makes sense when you look at their schedule. Penn State kind of screwed them by falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know their best win was that Penn State win, but now you can really argue their best win is at Northwestern, which Northwestern, 5-3, not, they're going to be a bowl team out of the Big Ten, but that's not a win you're really going to hang your hat on and be like, hey, this is going to get us in. So that does kind of make sense. Even though they played Indiana close, they really don't have a good win. This win, I mean, their last 4 games though, Iowa, who's number 20 now in the poll, USC, who's 19th, Washington, who's 23rd. So you're going to get a good opportunity in that game in between Minnesota. Minnesota's sitting there at 6-3, so not exactly a bad team either to get on your schedule. So Oregon's going to have plenty of time, with 4 games left. That's the one thing too with the bracket. Also don't want to be too like crazy. Another thing, Texas going all the way back up to 11. I'm surprised the kind of the first teams out of Texas, Oklahoma, Utah shooting all the way back up to 13th in the country was kind of surprising to me. And that's the other real thing. If you look at the bracket, the Big 12 right now is poised to get two teams in, kind of like
Hmm.
the ACC did last year. Because, even if, especially if Texas Tech beats BYU, BYU only has one loss, they'll still be hanging around. Utah's right there, if they win their last three games, sitting there at 10-2, even if they can't sneak their way into the conference title game, you're still looking at a BYU team at 10-2. They're at 13 right now. All they got to do at the moment is climb up three spots. It's possible, especially with all these SEC teams as good as they are, they're still going to be beating each other up. I think the Big 12, barring any crazy collapses or upsets, can sneak in at least two, maybe three teams, especially if BYU loses close. Those two teams end up winning out, go into the Big 12 title game, and it's Texas Tech versus BYU. And then you have the Big 12, it's a very outside shot, but the Big 12 has three teams that are very much alive for an at-large bid, let alone, going on, getting the auto bid. But those were kind of the big things that stood out to me. Outside of that, Georgia Tech falling down to 17, the ACC really, is not that strong. You have a big, grouping of those ACC teams between 14 and 18, with Vanderbilt sitting in between there at 16. And then going down the poll a little more. I don't know. I guess I'm surprised Iowa's in the top 25, but nothing really jumping off the page outside of that.
Yeah, and should have let off with this at the beginning, but for those who aren't aware of the rule change this year, last year it was the top four seeds were the highest four conference winners, regardless of if they were. We saw Boise State as one of the teams with the bye last year. This year, it's just the top four teams in the country. It's still the four major conferences. Their conference winner gets an auto berth. Then the highest ranked G5 team will get an auto berth as well. In this case, it's Memphis, who wasn't even in the top 25. But that doesn't matter for the top four teams to get a bye this year, as we see two SEC teams and we see two Big Ten teams with Alabama and A&M at the SEC, Ohio State and Indiana there out of the Big Ten. So that's one of the major switch-ups this year. But then you look too, Joe, like the SEC had 6 teams ranked in the top 12, but then you go to having to include the conference champion of the ACC. You have to go and include the highest ranked G5 team. That pushes number 11 Texas and number 12 Oklahoma out. Virginia comes in at 14, the highest ranked ACC team. They vault in. Memphis wasn't even ranked. They're the highest ranked G5 team according to the committee's rankings. And they have a game, I think, this Friday night against Rice. And a couple of weeks ago, they just slipped up against UAB. So Memphis, not set in stone for sure. I think last year it was kind of Boise State from start to finish. South Florida and Tulane, I think, each have 2 losses now. So it really is kind of Memphis' spot to lose at this stage. But still, they're not a shoo-in as well, because they could go and win the American, and they might not even be guaranteed to get in. That's the thing with the G5. It's going to be kind of up to speculation. But if they go and win out, they probably are going to make it. But you look at a team like Texas, you look at a team like Oklahoma, both still have really challenging games on their schedule. They could definitely find themselves in. Virginia sitting here at 14th ranked, but 11th in the playoff. They could definitely find themselves on the way out. If they lose in the ACC title game. The ACC, I think, definitely at this stage, especially after Georgia Tech's loss this weekend to NC State, only going to find one team in the playoff. And like you said, the Big 12 probably going to find 2. And then the SEC and Big 10, they're kind of fighting now for the rest of the spots, I think, kind of is my main takeaway from this. But I guess looking at the initial bracket, Joe, if you kind of want to, fill it out in your head a little bit, or any matchups that kind of catch your eye, I think for sure all the SEC teams, that Georgia, Ole Miss, that both of those teams I think would roll in their matchups. I think Oregon probably beats up on Texas Tech, and then Notre Dame BYU. I think is a pretty interesting matchup. Let's say though Notre Dame wins, you get the Notre Dame Indiana rematch from last year. Then you get A&M, Ole Miss, Ohio State, Oregon, and then Alabama, Georgia. Like those quarterfinals would be pretty awesome if it went like that, Joe.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I think that's how I would shape it out if I was filling out a bracket.
I
The
think that's at least
closest,
who would be favored in every matchup.
yeah, the closest obviously would be Oregon, Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm.
If you asked me, Texas Tech, I think is the best team in the Big 12. I know they got upset at Arizona State. They got to play
Healthy
BYU
Arizona
this week.
State.
Yes, so we'll see there. But I mean, Texas Tech, the one thing, Coyle, they're not shy to brag about the fact that they bought a lot of players with NIL money. And I mean, it's showing. Texas Tech looks like a legit playoff, not only play like a national title contender if the bracket breaks the right way. I know it's gonna be a little bit harder to get like a really good break now because you don't have the top four. You don't have those bye weeks like Penn State last year went to the semifinals, but they beat SMU at home and they beat a G5 team in Boise State in the quarterfinals. But Texas Tech, if they can get a break. Like I think having to play Ohio State in the quarterfinals would be tough. But who knows if you get a Bama or an A&M now, they're great teams. I'm not taking anything away from them, but I really do think right now it's Ohio State and then the rest of the field. But Texas Tech could potentially get a little bit of a break and maybe be playing on semifinal, that Thursday, Friday in like mid-January. Texas Tech's a really good team. But outside of that, yeah, listen, love the story with Virginia. They're really cool. I don't think they're going to end up winning the ACC. Sorry, Sikorsky, preseason $3 to win 330. He put it on Virginia to win the ACC. He's a lunatic. But I think Ole Miss would roll Virginia. Memphis, I think, would get stomped by Georgia. That being said, though, Memphis, Coyle, you were saying, big game Friday night. They host Tulane.
Hmm.
That's huge for the
Memphis is
American
Tulane.
Conference race. Yeah,
Okay.
they beat Rice last week. I
Rice
thought
last
Rice was
week.
going to cover. I was very wrong. They finish actually Memphis. They get Tulane, who's sitting there at 6-2 at East Carolina. Not a bad team in the American one, but not great. And then they get Navy, who's currently sitting at 7-1. So two big games left for Memphis. And like we were saying, I know they're unranked right now. Memphis win out, you'll be in the top 25. But like you said, trip up, and who knows? Right now, everyone's saying that they think the American is going to be the team that gets the G5 rep in. But the Mountain West has some good teams too. James Madison over there in the Sun Belt still a pretty good team. I don't think anyone from the Conference USA is getting in, and the MAC. I think everyone has at least 3 losses already. So I don't see the MAC getting representative in, even though we got MACtion going on right now. But
Hmm.
I think Memphis is a pretty good team. I think the American is a really good conference. I think they're the clear cut number 6 out of, or number 5 really, because Pac-12 right now doesn't exist. RIP. But I think that Memphis, definitely would deserve to get that nod right now. But so much of this could change. Coyle, like you said, last year Boise was so head and shoulders above all those other teams that it wasn't really close. But South Florida, I know they choked against Memphis. They lost that game at Miami. South Florida's still a really good team too. If they went out and they could find their way into the American Conference title game, you could see USF, and I think USF would be able to give these teams a game. I don't think they necessarily win, but I think they'll be able to give them a game. And Memphis, who the heck knows? They were dead to rights twice already, and they came back and won. So you never know. I would like to see, keep it close if they can get in. I think Georgia's too good for them, especially going on the road. But I don't know. I'm really excited. I said it last year, the people who are like, this is terrible for college football. I don't know. We just don't see eye to eye. I think this is fantastic for the sport. I know the playoff games in the first round last year weren't exactly the most exciting games in the world, but I still think this is great that you're getting these games that just mean so much more in the regular season. And people keep saying, well, the values, like, the Michigan Ohio State game is like, oh, well, that the values that game. I still don't think so. That was still a huge win for Michigan. They're still bragging about it, even though Ohio State went on to win the national title. I still think all these games matter. I just think it actually amplified some of these other games. Like one of the games we're going to be talking about in a little bit is Oregon, Iowa. In years past, number 9 versus number 20, we would talk about it still as a top 25 game, but it'd be like, yeah, Oregon's got to win out to even have a shot at getting to the 14 playoff. Now you have an Iowa team that if they win this game, they're all of a sudden maybe in the field. Where, and Oregon, if they win this game, they kind of secure their spot. So I don't know. There's pros and cons, but I think this is mostly a very positive thing for college football.
Yeah, and then also I think it leaves kind of going bit based off of what you were just saying as well. Like I think looking at the 12 team bracket right now, I probably would put in pen 4 teams and put in pencil 5. I would definitely lock in Alabama, Ohio State, A&M, and Indiana. Barring they all lose out, I think they're going to be in. And I think Ole Miss, looking at their schedule, I think it's the Citadel. think it's Florida. Yeah, Florida at home, which they did lose to last year, but that was at the Swamp, and then Mississippi State. Mississippi State's been tough, but I think Ole Miss should be able to handle them this year. I'd say those 5 teams, I would probably, almost give 100% chance of making right now. Like Oregon, you touched on it. Who have they really beat this year? Could they lose to Iowa this week? And I think they still play Washington too, who's a stingy team. They're in the top 25. Georgia has had like devil magic in the fourth quarters of every game this year. How sustainable is that? They still have to play Texas, and they still have to play a Georgia Tech team that we saw take them to, what was it last year, 8 overtimes, 9 overtimes or something like that. And Georgia Tech before last week was one of the tougher teams in the country. So I think that they could slip up. Texas Tech, where we're not putting in Sharpie yet, we're not putting in Sharpie, BYU, Notre Dame. If they lose one more game, they're definitely out. Virginia, obviously not. And so those top 4, I think we could say. I think Ole Miss is in, and then from there, I think it's kind of up for debate still. People might argue that Georgia should definitely be in regardless, but I think there's more likelihood that Georgia loses one of their last few games than Ole Miss does. And Oregon, their resume, and they're not going to have a chance most likely to play in the Big Ten title game. I think that kind of makes it for a fun last kind of season, month of the season, regular season coming up, as a lot of spots are still up for grabs. So. Any parting words on the 12-team playoff, Joe, before we get into this week's games? Not the most exciting slate this week, but still a few big games, especially based off of these rankings that, a couple of these teams lose this week. They might find themselves on the outside looking in come playoff time.
No, Beef, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. And it's funny, that you say that, but like we now have 3 ranked versus ranked games coming into this weekend that we'll get into in just a second. But I'm really excited. Like, we said, so much can happen. Like, I remember even back in the 14 playoff, the initial 14 playoff, Mississippi State was number 1. I think Ole Miss was 3, Auburn was 2, and then you had one other team. Like, so much stuff could change. You're going to have one of these teams that's currently in the top 12 outside of like Memphis. I'll say one of the I'll say top 10. You'll have one of those teams in the top 10 that'll probably finish outside of the top 15, because there's just no way that this is going to hold. It's just college football. You're going to get an upset here and there.
Yep.
You're going to get these big games. You're going to get other teams surging out of nowhere. So, I mean, it's a lot of fun, and it's exciting to see, what we're in store for next.
All right. Well, without further ado, we'll get into this week's games. Like I said, not the greatest slate, but it could get a couple upsets. We touched on it already. Like if Iowa beats Oregon, is Oregon going to get in the playoff? And Iowa certainly puts themselves in conversation for the playoff, having lost to Indiana, probably Indiana's toughest game of the year. We got Texas A&M and Mizzou, BYU, Texas Tech, Navy, Notre Dame. So we got a handful of good ones, but we're going to start on Friday night, actually. Haven't talked about this team on the show, I think, all season, but I want to give them some credit. They're a win away from being bowl eligible, and coming into the year, they were projected 3 or 4 wins. That's Northwestern at 5-3, already 3-2 in the Big Ten. They'll travel out to LA to play number 19 USC, who's still alive in the playoff conversation at 6-2, 4-1 after they go to Nebraska and win last week. 9:00 kick on Fox. USC, though, a 14.5-point favorite. Over under is 50.5, Joe.
USC here 35-20. I think USC is just a better team. Friday night, we talk about it all the time with these teams having to travel so far. This is a huge game for Northwestern, obviously. Coyle, like I said, or like you were saying, they're having a great season so far. Shout out Northwestern. They were, not projected to do anything, and they're sitting here, 5-3. If they went out, they could have a pretty good season, maybe even get to a pretty good bowl game. Obviously, they're not going to be in the playoff, but you can still really get a pretty good season. They had a tough loss at Nebraska last week, but I just think USC is the better team here. And while Northwestern is having a pretty solid season, once again, they beat Penn State. Like, I don't really know how to grade that game at this point, because that was Penn State's 3rd straight loss. That was a game that got Franklin fired. I just think USC is a step up. They hosted Oregon earlier in the year, lost by 20. Now you got to go on the road to USC. I just think they're going to be outclassed a little bit. They're going to get out athleticized, however you want to say that. But I think USC, I didn't know really how to say that. But USC is the more athletic team. There we go. And I think USC is going to take care of business. They'll cover the 14.5. I have the game 35-20. I'm going to go over 50.5. I know the dogs bark on Friday night, but I still think USC is going to get the job done.
Yeah, if this game was at Northwestern, I might have been barking a little bit of a different tune and giving them more of a chance to win this one. But I do like USC to win. But I will say that Northwestern kind of keeps it close and keeps it within the number here in this matchup. You look at Northwestern's final few games at USC this week, then they play Michigan, they host Minnesota, and they go to Illinois. If they can find a way to win one of these last 4 games and be a bowl eligible team, I think that's a massive success for that program. As we know, undergoing all kind of stadium renovations and everything, it's not wild to say you can look at a team like Indiana, you can look at a team like Texas Tech. Like anything is possible these days in college football in terms of being able to have a quick turnaround. Like I saw Bill O'Brien today go on a rant at a press conference about how they're building this program. They're in the second year. Like as much as you want to say that, and that could be true for some programs and still the way that they want to do things, that excuse I don't think flies as much as it used to. I mean, you look at Auburn and Hugh Freeze this week, another one getting fired. Like Kirk Cignetti has really changed the way I think college athletic directors and fan bases are going to be looking at these programs these days. Like Texas Tech has been a bit of a more build, but this year they got a huge infusion of money, and look what they're able to do. Like just Northwestern produced a lot of wealthy donors. Like if one day they turn around and decide to start donating a bunch of money to football, maybe that's a team that gets in the mix. And I think that's the cool thing about this whole NIL stuff. So long story short there about Northwestern, I still don't like them to win this week. I think USC wins, keeps their playoff hopes alive, but I will take Northwestern to cover, and we'll go with the over there. I think since Lincoln Riley's been the head coach at USC, they've been the best team in the country to the over. So USC 31, Northwestern 23, Northwestern plus 14.5 or 50.5. All right, Saturday, probably the game of the week. Very good chance, even if Texas Tech or even if BYU loses this game, I think there's a very good chance we see these teams face off down the line in the Big 12 title game. Arizona State out of the mix now. Utah kind of hanging around there, but Utah lost to both of those teams, so they would need a lot of help for sure. But number 7, BYU at 8-0, 5-0 in the Big 12 will travel to Lubbock to play number 8, Texas Tech, 8-1. 5-1 in the Big 12. Noon kick on ABC. Texas Tech, 10.5-point favorite here, over under 52.5. Back-to-back years now, BYU has been getting disrespected, I think, by the books week after week. They've came out and proven it week after week that they deserve more respect. But last year, they fell apart down the stretch. Do you think they do the same thing this season, Joe?
Yes, I actually do think they fall apart down the stretch again. They are at Texas Tech this week. I think Texas Tech's going to win this game 42-31. I'm going to go Tech minus the 10.5, over 52.5. But real quick, the rest of the way, they host TCU, who's not a bad football team. Then they go to Cincinnati. Then they host UCF. I think they're going to go 2-2 down the stretch or worse. I think BYU is going to be sitting there on the outside looking in again. I think they're a good team, but if you look at who they've beaten so far, their best win is the Holy War against Utah, which they hosted that game and they won by a field goal. Texas Tech smushed Utah earlier in the year, and Texas Tech's also had to play Arizona State, a healthy Arizona State, as we've said. I know, BYU got a impressive win, a gutsy win against Iowa State, but like I was saying before, Iowa State now sitting there at 5-4 overall, 2-4 in the conference on a 4-game skid. I just think Texas Tech more talented than BYU is. This game being in Lubbock as well is a big difference for me. Um, but at the end of the day, I've already said it, Coyle, and you were talking about it with the money. Texas Tech went out and paid for this team. They are a very good team. I think Texas Tech is going to take care of business at home. I think this game is going to be a little bit reminiscent of the Utah-Cincinnati game, where everyone's kind of like, wow, he's number 7 versus number 8, and Texas Tech's favored by 10.5. I think that's just the books are telling you Texas Tech is that much better. And I think Texas Tech winning this game is going to propel them. Obviously, they'll go up a spot just because BYU is ahead of them. But I wouldn't be shocked if Texas Tech covers this spread and wins this game. They might be sitting there in the top 5 going into next week.
Yeah, the committee, I think, has a lot of love for this Texas Tech team. I'm going to take them to win, but I will take BYU to cover. I think 10.5 is a lot of points at the end of the day. And as I said at the beginning, BYU has been a team that I think has been doubted week in, week out. They were doubted against Utah. They were doubted against Iowa State a couple of weeks ago, and they've just came and they've delivered every single week. And I think that they're good enough to at least keep this within 10.5 points. That's a lot of points. But I do like Texas Tech at the end of the day to get the win at home. They've been a very good squad when they've been healthy. They've been a bit up and down, inconsistent kind of the past couple of weeks. Kansas State was hanging around last week, but they were able to put it on them in the second half. Is this Texas Tech team the best team in the Big 12 with a win on Saturday? I think that they could prove that with a double-digit win and a cover. I think they definitely proved that. But I like BYU to at least hang around and make this one close. That they've proven over the past couple of years now that they're able to win games when they've been counted out. They're able to really hang in there and surprise a lot of people, and they're able to win close games. Like if this game is within 3 points down the stretch, you got to probably like the chances that BYU wins because they're so used to playing these close games. But I do think Texas Tech at the end of the day at home here finds a way to get it done outright, 34-27. So give me BYU plus 10.5 over 52.5. All right, SEC now, number 3, Texas A&M, 8-0, 5-0 in the conference. At number 22, Mizzou, who is 6-2. Don't have their conference record. I want to say it's 4-2 overall, 5-2 maybe. 3:30 kick on ABC. A&M is a 6.5-point favorite here, over under 47.5. Bo Prabula out in this one. Matt Zollers, true freshman quarterback out of Springford, local to us out here, Joe, will be getting the start here. And, what other way to say welcome to the SEC than having number 3 Texas A&M and all those pass rushers coming after you?
Yeah, I am actually going to pick Missouri to pull off the upset here. Not because
Wow.
this is just a game everyone is saying A&M's going to roll. A&M's going to roll. This is a game that I'm going to take Mizzou plus the 6.5. That's a definite. And I think A&M is the better team. But you talk about it all the time, like trap spots, look ahead spots, the desperation spots. I think this is a desperation spot for Missouri. Their backs are quite literally against the wall. This is it. If they lose this game, even if they lose this game by an extra point in like 5 overtimes, they're still probably done at 6-3. They'd fall to 2-3 in the SEC. The rest of their season, they still have to. They end their year last 2 games at Oklahoma and at Arkansas. Now I know Arkansas stinks right now, but still ending your season on the road, rivalry game, not a spot you want to be. Pabula being out sucks. I mean, he was having a great year. Mizzou was a lot of fun. Who knows? If he doesn't get hurt, they might be able to stick it out and beat Vanderbilt. Obviously, he gets hurt. It is what it is. But I still think Missouri is going to win this game. I don't know why. A&M is the much better team, especially with Pabula out. But I'm picking Missouri here just because, I don't know, I want to be different because I think everyone is going to be picking A&M this week. So I'm going to go with Missouri 28-27. Take the over, and I'll take them plus the 6.5.
Yes, because A&M's looked at times. They've also had a couple of games where they've been close. Obviously, the Notre Dame game at the beginning of the year was one of the better games of the season. Auburn, they squeaked by 16-10. Arkansas, that game was a 3-point game. It was a little bit of a bigger score towards the end. Arkansas had a backdoor cover there, but that game was back and forth for a good part of it. Even the LSU game, like that game, LSU was up at halftime and A&M blew them out in the second half. So A&M still another team that finds ways to win. It seems like week in and week out. Despite how they play in the first half, that they're a team that actually takes that whole 60 minutes thing to heart, and they do play that every single week, and they kind of wear some teams down. I think that's one of the more impressive things about this A&M squad. They do wear teams down, and I think their athleticism, their athletes really show up in the second half against some of these more kind of inferior teams. Like you can say what you want about recruiting rankings and whatnot, but I think in games like this, for an A&M team that I think probably is a notch above Missouri in that regard, I think that kind of helps push them away. And when you're a true freshman quarterback in your first test, it like legitimate action in the SEC is against the number 3 team in the country, who's 8-0, who has NFL draft picks on that defensive side of the ball, who has an NFL or a highly respected college football head coach defensively in Mike Elko. It's just a nightmare disaster, I think, for Matt Zollers in the spot. If he goes out there, I think that and wins this game would be one of the more surprising things of the entire week. So would be cool to see that, especially for a local kid. But I think it's just at the end of the day too much going against him in this one. So give me A&M 30-20, A&M minus 6.5 over 47.5. All right, number 9, Oregon, 7-1, 4-1 in the Big Ten. At number 20, Iowa, 6-2, 4-1. in the Big Ten. 3:30 kick, I believe, on CBS. Oregon, only a 5.5-point favorite here. Haven't looked that great over the past few weeks. Over-under is 41.5, Joe.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Oregon here, 24-21. I think this will be a close game, low scoring. I'll take Iowa plus the 5.5. I'm going to go over, which is never fun to take in Iowa games because even if Oregon wins this game 27-0, obviously the over isn't going to hit. I do think this is a pretty solid Iowa team, though. Mark Gronowski, they got him over from San Diego State, excuse me, South Dakota State. Um, Iowa is, they're 6-2. They lost by a field goal to Iowa State, rivalry game, Cyhawk game. Iowa State, I know, has looked terrible since, Iowa State's been kind of banged up. And then they lost by 5. I'm going to say by a touchdown because at the very end, Mendoza running away, ended up taking the safety there. That game was already, secured for Indiana. So I'll say, but 10 points for 2 losses isn't bad. And since then, Iowa has been taking care of business. They just smoked Minnesota a couple of weeks ago, who, like I was kind of talking about earlier a little bit, not that bad of a football team. Um, what else? They beat Penn State. They beat Wisconsin 37-0. But like I said, they've taken care of business. This is a big game that I'm very excited to see the Iowa fans, striped out, blackout. I don't know what they're going to be doing, all drunk in the stands. I can't wait to see that. Oregon going to a place like Iowa is one of the cool things now about realignment because Oregon would have never agreed to go to Iowa back in the day. But I still think Oregon's a better team. I still think Moore is the better quarterback. I think Oregon wins this game. And Coyle, like I was already talking about a whole heck of a lot. You were talking about it as well. 3 out of the last 4 games are against teams currently ranked in the college football top 25. So Oregon's going to have plenty of opportunities to put themselves back into getting a home game. And potentially, if they win out, getting into like a first round bye situation.
Yeah, plenty of opportunities, like you said, ahead, but that also comes with, I don't think really Oregon's been playing great over the past few weeks. So it gives you plenty of opportunities to slip up as well. Like when we talked about it earlier, like an Ole Miss has a very easy schedule down the stretch with the Citadel, with a reeling Florida team, and then Mississippi State. Oregon has a handful of tough more matchups coming up with Iowa, with Washington on the schedule. So these are you can look at it from either side, an opportunity to improve your resume, but also more likelihood of slipping up and potentially not making the playoff at all. So I think you can look at Oregon and say they might actually have the most pressure of them out of any team that we've talked about so far this week. But with all that being said, I think that they find a way to get this one done. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game. I do have the over hitting, but I think it could be one of those kind of late last second touchdowns, maybe by Iowa or Oregon to kind of push it over the top. 5.5 is a really tricky number there. It's like, I think on paper, we all agree that Oregon's better. I think they have the better quarterback. It's a tough environment to go into. I think Iowa fans, I forget if you touched on it or not, we're probably wishing that this was a night game. I think that would add a little bit different element to this one potentially. And we saw Oregon kind of, the Penn State game obviously was a big one, finding a way to go there. And when we saw them do that before, but then the best team that they played all year, Indiana, they looked pretty bad against. So what Oregon team shows up? Even a couple of weeks ago against Rutgers, they didn't. Or excuse me, Rutgers, they looked really good. I think it was the Wisconsin game, 2 weeks ago or last week, where they really struggled to move the ball. This is a really good Iowa defense, the same blueprint that we've seen from Iowa year over year. Are they able to capitalize and cause some turnovers in this one? They played Indiana really tough. Why can't they do it to Oregon? I think is what people are going to be thinking. But I just think at the end of the day, Oregon's got a little bit too much firepower, a little bit too much athletes, and they find a way to get it done on the road here and cover 27-17. So Oregon minus 5.5 over 41.5. All right, ACC now. Our ACC representative, number 14, Virginia at 8-1, 5-0 in the conference. We talked about it last week. Their only loss to NC State, but for some reason that wasn't a conference game. But Virginia, the highest ranked team in the ACC right now, they find themselves in the playoffs as the number 11 team. As of Tuesday night, they will be hosting Wake Forest, who one of the surprises, I think, out of any of the Power 4 teams, 5-3, 2-3 in the ACC. Coming off a big win against SMU 2 weeks ago, then absolutely looked terrible last week against Florida State. Curious what team shows up on Saturday night, but 7:00 kick, ESPN. Virginia is a 6.5-point favorite, over under 48.5. I know they had that Friday night game against Florida State about a month ago, Joe, but biggest home game ever for Virginia in this one, like night game, first time ever ranked it in the college football playoff. Like, do you think this is like a sellout type of environment for the Hoos?
It better be a sellout. I mean, even if you don't want to bring the same energy you did for Florida State, like you have an opportunity here. You put yourself at 9-1 with 2 games to go. Virginia has a tough one at Duke, who Duke's not dead either. I know they're 5-3, but sitting there at 4-1 in the conference. That's one thing with the ACC too. Virginia is 5-0, but the next one, two, three, four, 5 teams below them are either 5-1 or 4-1. So there's still a whole heck of a lot to still be decided in the ACC. Um, but I really hope the Virginia fans show out. I mean, this is huge. This is probably the best. Maybe back in like back in the day they were good, but in our lifetimes and in the students' lifetimes, this is the best Virginia team we've ever seen. I think in 20, I want to say 18, maybe 2019, they were ACC runners up, but they got the bid to the Orange Bowl because that's how like the New Year's Six bids worked. But besides that, this is the best Virginia football has ever been, and they have a very real shot to make the playoff. They have a very real
Mhm.
shot with Chandler Morris at QB. He's been awesome this year. Virginia has been a fun team to watch, and they're a team. You were talking about devil magic with Georgia. Virginia has pulled out so many one-score games. I think it's unsustainable, and eventually I think it'll come back to bite them. But I think they're going to win this game because I think they're the better team than Wake Forest. I'm going to go Virginia 31, Wake Forest 20. So I'll take Virginia minus 6.5. I'm going to go over 48.5. I think, this being like, imagine, telling you at the beginning of the season, oh, yeah, the Wake Forest Virginia game is going to be the ESPN primetime game. You'd be sitting there like, man, that week's a dud. This is terrible. Like, how is that the game? And the Clemson Florida State game, which we're not even talking about, is on the
Yeah.
ACC network. Just
Hmm.
crazy how this season has unfolded. I think Virginia's going to win this game. Won't be getting the barbershops all fired up down in Winston-Salem, but I think that Virginia is going to win this game. It won't be easy. This will be a game in the fourth quarter that you're either going to see tied or Virginia's maybe even down a couple of points and has to put together some drives. But I think they'll pull away late and cover. Maybe not by 11 points, but I still think they'll cover that 6.5.
Yeah, I think this one being at Virginia too. That was a pretty electric environment in that Florida State game when they actually showed up and showed out as a fan base. If they're able to do that again, I think that definitely gives them the advantage at home here against this Wake Forest team that has really surprised this year. But I think the last week kind of showed a little bit more like who they actually are than rather who they've been for a majority of the season. I think they've kind of played over their head. If this was a game at Wake Forest, I would definitely, pencil this in as kind of that trap game of the week. But with it being at Virginia, with Virginia having pressure on them, I think is fair to say. But they have to win these games. You can't afford any slip ups. The one benefit that they have going for them right now, their only loss this year is out of conference, so that doesn't affect them. Even if they lose, they're still going to have a good chance to make the college football playoff. Just want to look at their schedule the rest of the way. Um, they have, I assume, Virginia Tech the last game of the season. Yeah, so they got Wake Forest this week. Wow, they only got 3 games left, but Wake Forest at Duke that you were talking about, and then versus Virginia Tech. I think they're probably a dog at Duke, right, Joe? And definitely a favorite at home versus Wake Forest. So you take care of business in 2 of those 3 games, you're probably going to the ACC title game if you're Virginia. I think that should kind of be the goal here down the stretch. But you can't beat Duke or you can't beat Virginia Tech until you beat Wake Forest. So give me Virginia on Saturday night, 30-23, just covering there, minus 6.5 and over 48.5. All right, final game of the week. Our labeling this our G5 game of the week because we got Navy in it at 7-1. They win this game on Saturday night. They put themselves right back in the playoff talk, right back in the playoff conversation. Maybe even Joe, the playoff team out of the G5 next week if they win this game. They go to number 10 Notre Dame, who is 6-2, 7:30 kick on NBC. Notre Dame though 26.5-point favorite over under 56.5. I know Notre Dame took it to them in the matchup last year, but is 26.5 points too much?
I don't. I think there should be more. I mean, I think we saw it last year. Navy and Army had their best seasons in years. Navy going into that game. I think they play at MetLife. Wasn't that the T-shirt Pat spent $50 on, and that was the "I Can't Take It" video. He's, I think,
Yeah.
wearing that T-shirt. Um, but Notre Dame smoked Navy, and then they smoked Army as well. And those two ranked wins, I enjoyed it as a Notre Dame fan. Really helped kind of propel the resume. I think Notre Dame's going to win this game big, 45-10. I think
Wow.
they'll smoke Navy. Now, we've seen crazier things. I know Navy in years past has come into Notre Dame Stadium, shocked the world. They beat Notre Dame. I just think Notre Dame is a much better football team. I don't know why my phone is turning sideways again. It did this last week. I'm going to finish my talk before I try to fix my phone here. But I think Notre Dame at the end of the day is a better team. But Coyle, kind of like you were saying, no, I'm not. It's going to bother me too much. But Coyle, kind of like you were saying here, at the end of the day, if Navy can pull this off, you're they might just be in the top 25 next week. Not even like how Memphis is the unranked, but
Yeah.
they're 12th. They might even jump Memphis winning this game.
Who's Navy's
Um,
lost to?
Navy's loss is North Texas. They just lost last
Okay,
week.
last week, yeah.
But I'll tell you
North
what,
Texas still in the mix too.
the end of their season, North Texas is very good. The end of their season, including that North Texas game, North Texas, Notre Dame, South Florida, Memphis, Army. So Navy could finish 7-5, or they could turn it around and finish 10-2, 11-1, and be playing for a playoff spot. But I think Notre Dame is a much better team here. I would like to see Notre Dame maybe go play at Navy. I think that'd be pretty cool. Instead of doing either the neutral site thing or hosting them, I think it'd be pretty cool to go to Navy. But I think Notre Dame's just a better team here. I have them winning 45-10.
Yeah, and a side note, I saw a tweet projected first round college football playoff spreads for those matchups we talked about. Georgia, 21-point favorite against Memphis. Texas Tech, Oregon, a pick 'em actually, with that game being at Texas Tech. So, technically Oregon, I guess you would say, would be the favorite there. Ole Miss -17 at home against Virginia. Notre Dame -7 at BYU. I like Notre Dame to win this one too. 26.5 though. Like, I know Notre Dame has looked really good at sometimes, but last week they were in a dogfight with a 1-8, 1-7 Boston College team. Like, I just don't think it's a scenario where they should be getting or laying 26.5 points against anyone right now. Could be the trap of the week, and the score more reflects your prediction of a 45-10. But I think Navy keeps it within 3 scores and covers. I'll still get Notre Dame to win pretty comfortably, 38-17. But Navy plus 26.5, under 56.5. Maybe didn't learn my lesson from last year, because I think I did take it last year, and I think it was actually closer to like 14 points in that matchup or something. So they basically doubled this year with the spread, but I'll give Notre Dame the win, but Navy the benefit of the doubt with the cover. 38-17 Notre Dame wins, plus 26.5 for Navy, and under 56.5 in there. All right, final 2 picks of the week. Long show this week, but I think over the next month or so, try our best, schedules permitting, to go Tuesday night after the playoff rankings come out, dive into those, and then the games of the week. We're obviously going to have some important games coming up down the stretch as we look to iron out this playoff. But our last 2 picks are dog of the day and our lock of the week. Dog of the day, favorite underdog of the week. Joe, I don't know if I took potentially your pick here, but I'm going with the UConn Huskies at home, plus 9.5 against Duke. Huskies sitting there 6-3 on the year, already bowl eligible. Credit to Jim Mora for turning around that program and making them at least somewhat respectable. Plus 9.5 here against a Duke team that can put up some points, but so can UConn. UConn's quarterback's been awesome. I think I saw like 21 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And we saw last week Duke's defense, despite having a defensive-minded coach in Manny Diaz, couldn't stop a Clemson offense that has really struggled for a majority of the season. So I think UConn's going to be able to put up some points. Maybe they'll even look at the over in this matchup. I think it was like 66.5 though. A lot of points there, but I like the Huskies to keep this one close, plus 9.5, and think that they could potentially pull off the upset.
Yeah, UConn's a weird team this year. They're having like for UConn standards, a pretty good year, but overtime losses at Delaware, who's in their first year of the FBS. Syracuse was an overtime loss, then an overtime loss to Rice. But then they just come out and smoke UAB. My dad was at the game. He was telling me UConn looked like a national title contender. He was shocked at how good they looked. So I think this is going to be a really good game. I'm excited to see what the crowd looks like at UConn. One of the biggest home games for UConn in a long time. I hope they can at least stay competitive because I would like to see UConn football be at least relevant to make bowl games every year and not be an independent. Because their schedule is pretty soft. But it is cool to see UConn being talked about a little bit here. My dog of the day, I'm going to go Florida State plus the 2.5 at Clemson. I just think Clemson's broken. They're just Dabo. I think he'll be gone at the end of the year. I think Clemson's going to let him finish it out. Clemson is just not very good. Cade Klubnik, what a disappointment this season's been for Clemson. Um, I think Florida State plus 2.5 is the play. I don't think Clemson should be favored against a lot of teams in the ACC right now. So I'm going to go with the Seminoles plus 2.5.
All right, and then our lock of the week, our favorite bet of the week. I'm going to go with Indiana minus 15.5 at Penn State for my lock of the week. Listen, at Penn State, I think right now, just a dead program. They're just ready for the year to be over. I know this one's at Penn State. I doubt this is a sellout crowd. I don't know how many people are going to be showing up to watch the product that they've been putting on the field. And I know they put up a nice fight in the first half at Ohio State last week, but Indiana's just a wrecking ball right now. 55-10 last week against Maryland, won by like 60 the week before against UCLA. They're just destroying everything in their path. I don't think Kurt Cignetti really has any remorse, and I think they're just going to keep putting the foot on the gas pedal. So give me Hoosiers minus 15.5 this week at Penn State for my lock of the week.
Yeah, Coyle. I think that's a pretty good pick here. My lock of the week, kind of a similar vibe to how your pick is. I'm going TCU minus 6.5 at home against Iowa State. I was talking about Iowa State a little bit already. They are another program that I think is just done. Four straight losses. And losses too to teams, Arizona State banged up. They lost that game at home. They, were tied with BYU. They end up, falling apart. BYU wins 41-27. They lose at Colorado. Colorado, that's their only Big 12 win. Colorado's sitting there at 3-6. They are terrible this year.
Yeah,
Um,
past couple of
at
weeks have been
yeah,
rough.
the Colorado is just not looking good. And Iowa State, just tough last four games. It's TCU is a solid team, especially they're 6-2. They're a very quiet 6-2. TCU is, and if they win this game, which I think they will, they have a big opportunity against BYU. Then they play a Houston team who's 7-2, and then they host Cincinnati to end the year. TCU could end the season 10-2, and who knows how the Big 12 breaks. TCU could end up being in the Big 12 title game. So still a very important game for TCU. I think they win by at least a touchdown. I think Iowa State is another one of those teams that's like, just get us to the end of the season because this is just falling apart.
All right. Well, that will do it for this week. We talked about it where the headliner game, BYU, Texas Tech, probably the best of the week. But from there on, not that many headliner games that people are, I think, calling appointment television this week. So that means we're in for some chaos for sure. There's Wake Forest upset Virginia. It's Iowa upset Oregon. You got Missouri upset in Texas A&M. Something crazy is going to happen this week to shock up the college football playoff. The college football world, the college football rankings will actively be reflected by one of these major upsets this week. But excited to get back on the couch and hopefully YouTube TV situated by then, make everyone's life a little bit easier, and enjoy another good week of football. But as I said earlier, we will try and be back next Tuesday, schedule permitting, at night to break down the next week's college football playoff rankings and then the upcoming top 6 games of the week. So as always, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Everyone that was checking in on YouTube, on Twitter, live. It was a pretty good show for us tonight. But thank you everyone for tuning in. Please like, please subscribe, and we'll talk next week.